We're going to be looking at Hebrews chapter 9, verses 1 through 10. And we see that this section is describing the location and actions of the priests. And I pick that up here in verse 1. Now, even if the first covenant had regulations for worship, actions, right, rules, regulations of what they were supposed to do, and an earthly place of holiness. So the location. So it's concerned with the location and actions of the priests, and this is going to compare and contrast this with the high priestly nature of Jesus in the wider context of Hebrews 8 through 10. And we are continuing to trace that here in chapter 9. So let's break this down a little bit. Verse 2 through 5 describes the location of the priest's work. So I'm just going to read that now. For a tent was prepared, the first section in which were the lampstand and the table and the bread of presence. It is called the holy place. Behind the second curtain was a second curtain called the most holy place, having the golden altar of incense and the ark of the covenant, covered on all sides with gold, in which was a golden urn holding the manna and Aaron's staff that budded, and the tablets of the covenant. Above it were the cherubim of gold overshadowing the mercy seat. Of these things we cannot now speak in detail. Right? So he's just describing the special and unique dwelling place of God, the tabernacle, the sanctuary. It's describing these things. And there's the holy place and the most holy place. And then in verses 6 and 7, he's describing the regulations for worship. These preparations having thus been made, the priests go in regularly, right, key word there, regularly, into the first section, performing their ritual duties. But into the second, that's the most holy place, only the high priest goes, but once a year, and not without taking blood, which he offers for himself and for the unintentional sins of the people. So it's describing the actions here, right? So the priests go in regularly into the holy place, and the high priest goes into the most holy place once a year. And we learn a few things from this in verses 8 through 10. By this, the Holy Spirit indicates that the way into the holy place is not yet opened as long as the first section is still standing, which is symbolic for the present age. According to this arrangement, gifts and sacrifices are offered that cannot perfect the conscience of the worshiper, but deal only with food and drink and various washings, regulations for the body imposed until the time of Reformation. So we learn some things about the location and action of the high priests here. Since the high priests only entered the most holy place once a year, regular access to God's unique and special presence was not available. It wasn't available as long as the tabernacle was still standing. And it shows us that it cannot perfect the conscience of the worshiper, because it only deals with food and drink and various washings, regulations for the body imposed at the time of Reformation. And as we saw in Hebrews 8, basically the whole chapter, and as we'll continue to see in Hebrews chapter 9, because of the work of Jesus, God's people can have a regular access into the throne room of God. You could enter boldly into the throne room of God, right? And not only in the Old Covenant, only the high priest could go in once a year. But in the New Covenant, all of God's people who are indwelt by the Holy Spirit, right? Because of those things, we could have regular communion with our triune God. So just think about the great privileges that we have as the New Covenant people of God. We can have regular and constant communion. And we could even enjoy that now as we look forward to doing this in the future unhindered by sin. What a glorious passage. See you guys next time.